Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and tonight on my podcast, I am so happy to have my favorite podcasting partner, sorry everybody else, Jason Perez.
Yo, my peoples, what's up? Am I really your favorite? Come on,
Yeah, like
come
you know, you're,
on. I could take top 25th percentile, but your favorite? I don't know about that.
we've just done it together so many times. It's fun, like it's
You
like
just
hanging out
say
with a
that to
friend.
all the boys. You say it to all the boys.
Untrue.
Well, I am very glad to be back in the podcasting chair. It's been a little while. I put Every Night is Game Night, the aforementioned podcast me and Liz have been on pause. But that when the Rona hit around like April, May time, it's been nice. It's been nice to kind of just. I mean, Rona has not been nice. It has not been good. But it's been nice to kind of like rejigger, reset some, expectations of myself and expectations for my content. And yeah, I'm looking to kind of get things ramped back up again. I'm happy to that this is like the first of a couple things I got working on. Okay.
So I have heard through the grapevine that you're thinking about breaking into YouTube.
You have heard correctly. So I imagine that part of that is you've been paying attention to the One Stop Co-op Shop. Thank you so much to the guys over there, Peter and Colin and Mike and Steve, for allowing me to cut my teeth on some videos. So I've done a couple of video playthroughs for them. By the time this episode posts, you'll be able to see my playthrough of Endangered, which is the new expansion for which is on Kickstarter right now. So that's been a real blessing to have that as a creative outlet. But I feel like, anybody who's listened to my show, I sustain the show basically, on my own, with lots of like a cast of thousands, like Anthony and yourself and Jeremy. But like it was really kind of me driving the ship, and I've been doing that for 3 years, and that's hard to let go. and I definitely want to do my own thing. So I am going to launch a YouTube channel. I do know the name, although I'm going to hold back on what the name is because I'm waiting for a logo. Um, as a matter of fact, this I can talk about. So I wanted to thank Jamie Stegmeyer. When the whole Black Lives Matter thing was happening and a lot of people putting out statements and everything, Jamie Stegmeyer not only just put out a statement, he put out a call to action for himself and for content creators around. And basically what he said was he was willing to, if people were willing to put in the work and actually making a channel, he'd be willing to kind of lend a little bit of expertise, a little bit of contacts, a little bit of a money here and there to kind of upgrade the equipment. And he's actually come through and he's actually done so. He helped me get in touch with somebody who's helped me design logo, working with some other people to kind of, figure out what tech is good and everything. So, I mean, money where your mouth is. It's been really good. I don't have a lot of people here who, like in my family or my close friend circle, who do anything like this. Not a lot of geeks amongst in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where I grew up. So having access to those connections has been amazing. I am getting launched. I'm hopefully going to be launching in a couple of weeks, and I will fill everybody in on what I'm doing, what the name is, and all that kind of stuff when everything is settled. But yes, this is the first that I am openly, publicly talking about.
Very well. I'll accept your partial answer. But let's get down to the business of tonight.
Yes, I'm
Which
just
is
getting back in the saddle right here, right now. We're doing our patented history chat. Can't wait.
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, Jason and I are both total history nerds, and Jason is a huge fan of Pandemic. So, we
Mm.
decided to have a podcast where we talk about Pandemic Fall of Rome.
Which is definitely up Liz's uh Liz alley. Yeah, there you go. That's a word, Liz's alley. About because you're a Latin scholar.
That is true. Yes. In fact, I'm getting ready to kick in my teaching year. So,
Good luck with that. Oh, high school teacher in Georgia. Watch out. Hopefully you make it the whole semester.
this was Liz Davidson's final podcast. No.
You went out with a bang, Liz. That's so macabre. I don't know if we should keep that. Why not? Let's keep it.
We'll keep it. So, I would merely be mimicking the fall of the Roman Empire, which is what we're talking about tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pandemic Fall of Rome, for those of you who don't know, is a game that uses the pandemic system, but instead of fighting against diseases that are spreading all over the world, you are taking on the role of Rome and you are trying to prevent the incursion of various groups of barbarians all over the borders of your empire. And if things get too out of control, if Rome gets sacked, if you can't make all your alliances with the barbarian groups in time, then you lose the game. Does that sound about right, Jason?
I think like it's important to note. It's funny how like I think with this game, I don't know how you feel about the game itself, but with this game, my interest in cooperative games and your interest in war games kind of start to eclipse like the sun and the moon together. Like I think Pandemic Fall of Rome was definitely in like re-engineered, inspired by some war game motifs. So like you have, especially in the way that troop movement happens. So like you have a very specific way in which the barbarians kind of like enter Rome. It's very kind of mapped out. It's kind of complicated. Like any kind of like AI system, very simplified, but like still for pandemic, it's complicated. But it's mimics troop movement. And also when you go and treat the cubes, you can't just treat them. You're rolling dice and just kind of simulate that, get that war game feel going on. So it's interesting how this was the pandemic that they engineered to be closest to a war game. And I love all the different variants of pandemic, but I found this one was interesting in how it tried to approach that cross genre synthesis. I'm not sure how you felt about how successful it was.
Yeah, it doesn't pretend to be a historical model in its own notes. So, you can't judge it that way, although I think it's worth considering. It is my favorite pandemic. I'm not as much of a pandemic person as you are. But I thought that, the Roman theme made it more interesting for me. And I don't know much about other reskins of the pandemic theme, but I liked the use of dice in battle because you don't just go and try to knock out every barbarian cube on the map, because every time you roll the dice, you risk losing your own legionaries as well. So for me, that was an interesting touch and something new.
But this isn't a review podcast, Liz. This is a history chat. We need to get into the history.
Absolutely. So I know you actually took notes.
I
Do
did.
you, as the guest?
She's like, I didn't do any work for this, but you did some work, right? Oh my God. Called out.
I don't have to work. What is work?
This is your life. I get it. You live and breathe ancient Roman history for breakfast and lunch and dinner, so it's all good. I'm the one that had to play a little bit of catch up, so I'm perfectly fine with that. So the way we do these history chats, and this is definitely not the last one. Me and Liz will get together. Liz and I will get together for the future ones of these. Hopefully, there are lots of more history games come down the pike that we're both interested in. So the way we do it is I'm a big fan of like the big history sweeps. Like I come at it from I have like a half a master's in history, so now I meant to teach with it. So like I'm decent with kind of context, and then Liz will come in and kind of fill in some of that granular detail and all that kind of stuff. So I do have some notes about the kind of context of everything. So like it's pandemic, fall of Rome. So we have to understand a little bit about like Rome. Rome was a giant, big old empire. It was probably at its height, right, as an empire around like 117. I think that's what the history books are saying. So like this is when Rome was enormous. Like it spread, and like people can't really understand. Like it's hard to grasp how big this is because it's you look at it and it's basically it covers the whole of Europe. It covers from Spain out to like Turkey, and then you go north. You're going from England down to like kind of Morocco, Tunisia type area, and it doesn't seem like a big thing for today's standards because obviously the United States is pretty big, other areas, but I mean for the ancient world to be able to maintain that big and that diverse a land area and achieve kind of a relative Pax Romana type peace was pretty impressive. So how did it happen? And there are about 217 reasons I can give. I'm not going to give 216 of those reasons, which is just pass by that. The thing for the purposes of this game and for the purposes of understanding Fall of Rome, it's probably most important to understand that the military discipline was probably at its peak in like the 100s, and it was a very the culture of militarism was big. It was a status symbol to be a soldier. it was an engine of acculturation. So like you have all these different tribes, and we're going to talk about the tribes in a second. But they didn't just like want to be Roman. Like you have to kind of give them inducements. So the being in the military offered to the different peoples, the different very diverse peoples, a way to kind of acculturate, become part of something, rise in social status, rise in, guarantee a better life for your kids. Kind of that trope over there. It was just a thing that everybody knew, and not that it was like perfect. I mean, corruption was rife. Corruption was rife all over Roman. There was only so far that you could rise if you were, especially if you were a foreigner. But there was enough. It was a big, fat, happy land, lots of resources, lots to share, and a lot of like good discipline and kind of like martial culture to go with it. So, do I have that right, Liz? Am I understanding that correctly, or am I completely off base?
Yeah, for that earlier era. But then we're getting
Yes,
up
for
to the
earlier.
period where pandemic fall of Rome is happening. So over time, right, you have all these different. Basically, the Roman Empire gets too big. Is what really
Right.
happens, in my opinion. You end up having two emperors, one in the east, one in the west. And not only that, but earlier imperial dynasties were sort of based in these patrician families. You might have these ideas of like, oh, this person's from an ancient family. They're very important. Like the very first Roman dynasty, the Julio Claudians, is basically ruling by purity of ancestry. They believe that the Julians believed they were descended from the goddess Venus. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but
I'm your
then
Venus. I'm your fire. I'm sorry, this is not
just
that bad.
like that, exactly. But but then you end up with this. So the Julio Claudians basically all kill each other off. Like Nero, by the time Nero kills himself, all the people that shared Julio Claudian blood have been assassinated because he like kind of got myopic in the sense that he thought the only person who could replace him, somebody else from his family. That doesn't happen. So you start having these kind of militaristic claims to the throne. And as the empire
Mm-hmm.
gets bigger, you can have a general with legions who decides that he wants to be emperor, and it just gets messy. And then before you know it, what is considered the fall of the Western Empire happens when Romulus Augustulus is deposed by Odoacer, who is a Ostrogoth, who is one of the actual tribes in Pandemic Fall of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And that is considered the fall of the Western Empire. Some people will tell you the Roman Empire never fell. I'm a late antiquity person. I kind of feel that way, but we'll just go with it. I think it's September 476 is the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Because like Rome, the capital had moved at that point, right? Like it
Yeah,
wasn't like
Rome is now
Rome,
a backwater. Constantinople's where it's at.
right? Right, but even like administering the Roman Empire, like they had moved to Ravenna, which is also a city in the game. Like Rome was basically like the New York City. It was like not like a backwater, but like it was still a place where you went, but it wasn't like the seat of governance. So like it was like very. It changed. Like Rome definitely changed. And not that it was strong, it diminished, but like it wasn't like one of those things. Like you say, fall of Rome. It's like okay, Rome's over now. It's a little bit of a misnomer. Rome never really fell like you have the Holy Roman Empire, which kind of rises from the ashes way later. But it's definitely kind of like changing and violently changing. So, but just to kind of give this the context like this, so fall of Rome, we're kind of like just kind of problematizing that idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, really what you could say is that rather than officially fall, Rome just kind of morphs slowly into sort of the late antique period and then into the Middle Ages. And it's
Right.
just a period of change.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one big dramatic moment where like, boom, the Roman Empire is gone. It's all over. Odoacer just kind of takes Romulus Augustulus' spot and keeps going.
Yeah. It's like we're just gonna keep it rolling. So then, okay, so that we talked about a little bit of why Rome was successful in terms of the martial discipline and having that kind of steady. I think there was just stability, like stability at the top and stability in the culture, and that just starts to fade as corruption sets in. So like you go to the 200s, also plague. I mean, probably shouldn't mention that now with what's going on, but
Well, we are
like
talking about pandemic.
it's true. Yes, you're right. So then, in the 200s is when plague starts to creep in. You have more barbarian invasions. Um, you have a kind of a centralizing central government, but it wasn't centralizing kind of a bad way. It was isolating itself from the countryside. So there were always quote unquote barbarians, and I know Les has a lot to say about that term. We will get to that, but just like non-Roman peoples, right? There were lots of them, and even though there was this system of acculturation, like there's only so many so much acculturation that can happen. There's still these entities that are keeping their own culture, and they're kind of like staking their own claim and negotiating with the Roman Empire for space and for autonomy. But that starts to cease around the 200 300s because the Romans are collapsing in on themselves, and corruption is setting in, and everything's kind of calcifying. So then you have this practice called receptio, and this is receptio is one of the things that kind of appears in the game. So then, as opposed to acculturating them, like now you're Roman, it's like, okay, we're going to establish an alliance and deputize the tribes. So like you're still a Frank, you're still or Angol or a Visigoth or whatever it is, but we're going to deputize this sect or this clan within whatever ethnic stock it is, and you guys are now Roman soldiers. You get none of the benefits of being actual Roman citizens, but we're going to deputize you. We're not going to bother you. You can levy taxes, you can do whatever. And that was basically like staunching the wound. Like, it was definitely kind of putting on a tourniquet on a wound, but not really treating the actual illness. So then that just becomes the kind of like the decay kind of sets in slowly and slowly and slowly. And it does cause a lot of problems, in terms of the expectations that were created when you get deputized, when you get Romans, and the Roman central government is increasingly not able to deal with or meet or do anything with the tribes.
Well, what makes it really interesting is that, by kind of giving people relative autonomy in certain parts of the world, Rome's actually being true to form. They like to create client kings, even somebody like the biblical King Herod, right? He's a
Right.
client king of Rome. And that used to work. But what is happening is that you have these groups of so-called barbarians who actually are building their own empires. They have their own society, their own culture, and they are basically being just like Rome. They want to expand their territory. They want to collect tribute. So one of the reasons that Rome ends up getting in fights sometimes is they stop paying a group of people that they paid to leave them alone. And then
Right.
of course it's like, well, I guess we'll have to come in then. And so actually one thing that Pandemic Fall of Rome does not capture, and I find this very interesting, is that even these barbarian groups, they're presented as all kind of encroaching on Rome, but they actually fought with each other.
Right.
So Rome at one point teamed up with the Ostrogoths to fight somebody else, and the Goths take out Odoacer, the Ostrogoth who took out Romulus and Augustulus, and then they put one of their guys in his place as kind of a fake client of the Eastern Roman Empire. And
Mhm.
so these people are all part of this same political military sphere where they make and break alliances with each other and with Rome throughout this
Mhm.
entire period of time. So it's not really like Rome is defending against the enemies at the gates. It's
Right.
actually much more complex than that. And I mean, this is a pandemic game. Like, it is what it is.
Right.
But, a lot of the kind of interest of this time period disappears in that format.
It's I'm so, and this is the heart of what when we were first excited to talk about this, is gets at the heart of what we wanted to discuss, which is, so you have Pandemic, and it kind of presents itself as a historical game. But when you and you can learn some history in it, like, no doubt, but when you really down into like what the actual pieces are doing, and what you're doing, and how you're interacting with the board, and how you, like, as a character, kind of immerse yourself into this world, it is not even close to to like what the actual tribes and the non-Roman peoples were doing. And I think I'm going to use that term rather than barbarians, because like that's like, basically, this is like, if you're looking at it from the perspective of Rome, like, oh, these people aren't as cultured as we are, these people are, their language is not developed, they don't have writing, they don't have this and the third thing, they're unwashed, barbarians at the gates and those kind of things. And that's definitely not, like, it wasn't the case. I mean, when we talk about Rome continuing, Rome continued because of the Franks, because of the Ostrogoths, as Liz was saying, and all these other tribes. So I wanted to kind of break down, because there's 5 tribes, right, or 5 colors, and they kind of
Yes.
shoehorn a bunch of more tribes in there, which is pretty hilarious. So I'll kind of break down what they're kind of did in history. So like you have the orange color, which is the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, which is pretty hilarious that they're all kind of like lumped in together because they fought amongst themselves, like Liz was saying, and they all have like a different history, but they're just in the game they're represented by this one color. That's they get it right. That starts like kind of north and Britain and everything, but they don't actually make it to like they fought against like the Romans in Britain land, but they don't actually move into the mainland. Definitely don't make it to Rome.
Yeah, nor do they really seem that interested in it.
Yeah, and they just wanted Britain. They just wanted like autonomy within their own land. So that's like one little anachronism there that's made it into Fall of Rome. And also so like there's another half of Orange, which is the Franks. So like the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, and the Franks do not belong together in any kind of historical sense whatsoever. But here they are in the game. They made the decision, based on gameplay. But like this is why we're here to kind of unpack some of this stuff, teach you guys something. Anyway, so then the Franks, they are more dramatic. They like the Franks have been around in Roman, like when Liz was saying like there's always been like kind of client kings and relationships with like non-Roman peoples. Like the Franks are definitely in that mix. They're mentioned in the histories as early as 200. They're definitely enjoying that receptio deal. They're definitely enjoying kind of client king and vassal king status and everything. And then but they're also kind of fighting, right? They're also getting in power struggles with Rome in France and with some of the Frankish tribes and everything. And but they never pressed towards Rome. I think they just kind of had hit this stasis point of like, okay, we want to just establish what we got here. Like, and they focused on Germany and France. They didn't advance towards Rome either. And then you have some of the other groups, right? So that's just one color. So then you get the Visigoths. The Visigoths are they're white color. They are, yes, they're Eastern in the Baltic states. They do get the starting places right, at least. They're generally located on the board map where they are generally, where they were in real life. So the Visigoths. You may have heard of the name Alaric. Alaric was a Visigoth, and Alaric was responsible for the sack of Rome in 410, which some scholars kind of linked, like identify as, okay, this is a marker when Rome fell. And yeah, if you look at the histories, there is this awareness that something happened when Alaric was, because he fought for the Romans and he was kind of in this scripture, but he is emblematic of one of those people that joined the army looking for something and looking for status and not getting it due to corruption and due to prejudice and due to like his status as a Visigoth, and he's never going to be fully Roman. So he's like, screw this, I'm going to be the king of the Visigoths and I'm going to take what's mine. But he didn't like seek to depose Rome. He just like, okay, he came in. I think they bribed him with some spoils to go away. Is that how it worked?
That's how it always works. You just always run out of money.
And so like, okay, so that story actually kind of checks out where like the Alaric king Visigoth, yes, he is going after Rome. So then they actually also include the Ostrogoths. Not sure why. Maybe they just needed another color.
Well, I mean,
um
the Ostrogoths are the ones who do eventually depose Romulus Augustulus, and they
okay,
did fight with the Visigoths, so it does make sense. But without that context, it's like, why are there so many Goths?
right, yeah. Yeah, and they're like these purple things that's all are on the board. They're kind of pain in the butt to deal with because there's so few of those cards, but that's a whole game thing. Okay, so the last two tribes, we'll just kind of get to them very quickly. So the Vandals were gray, and they originated around Poland. Poland, a little bit to the east of Germany. They were also kind of like frenemies of the Roman Empire, if I can borrow a modern term. Um, Although they actually were moved into Iberia by the Romans and later the Huns. So, like we talked about the non-Roman peoples fighting each other, they had to kind of flee their homeland because they were too close to the Huns, which were at the time a very successful conquering tribe. So it's like, all right, we're out of here. Go to Iberia, and then they consolidated it under a new leader. I believe the name was Genseric. Did I get that name right?
I think is it Gunderic?
Something like that. I have a Genseric. That's how I have it
It
spelled.
could be, yeah.
something like that. And then, so they are, and that actually they got the game kind of got that right, because they kind of have this looping trail in the on the board. So like they start kind of in the Poland area, they're moving to over Italy into Iberia, move down into North Africa, and eventually kind of establish themselves in North Africa. And they also sack Rome, and that was this happened a little bit later. And so like, and actually they, if anyone is any a religious history person, Pope Leo the Great, that's where he gets the name the Great from. He was in Rome and actually kind of saved the city, because the Vandals at this point, and that's where we get the term vandalize, because it was the Vandals that really kind of laid waste to Rome. And Pope Leo the Great is like sitting there going, okay, can you just take the money and not like burn stuff? And they're like, okay, money is nice. And they just and they get, and but that's where we get the name vandalize from. And again, it speaks to what we're going to talk about in a minute, which is like how our Roman centrism kind of determines our language, and how we refer to like barbarians, and we refer to vandalize. Like, I hear the word vandalize now, and it's like, wow, that was like a people, and people
Yeah.
that Rome kind of screwed over.
Also,
In,
Rome
like,
sacked many, many cities, but we don't call it Romanizing. Well, I guess we do, but it means something different, right?
yeah, right,
You know, interestingly, the Romans actually sent the Visigoths after the Vandals at one point.
right, hmm
So, like,
yeah,
all the it's like Game of Thrones. The interactions between different leaders and peoples is a lot more complicated and full of betrayal than one would expect.
right. So then, in all these cases, so like you have the Angles, the Saxons, the Franks, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, all these they've all kind of interacted with Rome in some way. So like, there's this mechanism where you can kind of establish alliance, and it's a pretty cool, because like, it basically does the same thing as Get a Cure in the base game. So like, form an alliance is, I've dealt with this tribe. It's funny because like the tribe keeps attacking. It's not like Pandemic, where if you clear the board and then that's it. That's it. The tribe does
Right.
keep attacking, but like, you can recruit them as allies, as like, okay, this little sect, this little clan within the larger ethnic, area, now they're mine, they're going to help me out here. So I found that like a really cool way of dealing with that. However, then you have the Huns, who didn't make alliances with anybody. If they fought for the Romans, it was like as breakaway mercenaries, but as like, and there were mercenaries all over the place, believe me. And there was lots of war to be had to be able to kind of get mercenaries for. So then the Huns, which are green, they come from Central Asia, and they're a little bit late to the party. Um, and like I'll say before, there were defections, but for the most part, you've heard of Attila the Hun. You've heard of these massive conquering tribes. They're definite, like, okay, a much more destabilizing force in the area. Like I said, they kicked out the Vandals from Poland, but they're mostly in the Eastern Empire, and they're mostly attacking Constantinople, which that might have been interesting, right? Like right now, Constantinople is just like this city, kind of like on the side of the board. Would have been interesting to kind of have like a double centered thing, but maybe that would have been too complicated, or maybe that just wasn't workable. But kind of like that would have been a historical like flag, because like Rome and Constantinople were kind of neck and neck for like primacy in that world,
Well,
and that's
actually, at that
really
point,
yeah,
what was interesting is that at this point, Constantinople is really where it's at. Once
right,
Constantine in like the 300s decides that Constantinople is his capital, Rome is forever taking a backseat to the east. And like people really, I think, underappreciate the contributions of the Eastern Roman Empire, even to our modern society. Every creed that people still say in church today, a bunch of the theological fights that we have gotten through, so that influence our culture right now, were not things that the Western Roman Empire contributed to. Pope Leo sent like the Tome of Leo over to one of the big church councils, and like that's it. A lot of what we have is really Eastern, and
right, right.
this kind of focusing on the fall of Rome and like kind of having that grief for the West and for Rome in that sort of classical sense is actually really missing the way that most people at that time would have seen it, because by that point Rome is not hot anymore.
Right. And what the problem comes where very like, so we're talking, this is the areas that are on the 400s. So then in the 600s is when Islam rises. And the Constantinople and the Ottoman Empire are kind of like it seems so far away, and then by the thousand you get the Crusades, and now the setting of like, the East is where a bunch of war happens, and the East is where a bunch of foreigners are. The West is our central identity, even though there's not much going on. Like obviously, there's always something going on. Especially if you're Irish, the Irish saved civilization with their writing, and but for the most part, in terms of like cultural, philosophical, theological, all that stuff is happening out west. You know, so it starts in that period, right? And like the Huns really try to get, because that, like as Liz was saying, they really are focusing a lot of their energy on conquering Constantinople and like in surrounding environments. Did they make a beeline towards Rome at any point? No. This game would probably give you the impression that like this tribe, the Huns, and all these other tribes were like kind of coordinating, and that Rome was the prize. I think, at this point, it's pretty clear that it wasn't. And so this game is it's evoking a story, but when you relook at it, it's kind of like kind of bad history. And I don't know how you feel about that, Liz. Maybe we could kind of talk a little less about history now and talk about historiography, like the way we tell stories. Like in terms of a historiography piece, does this game maybe even do a little bit more harm than good?
I think in some ways. So I mean, I will tell you, I enjoyed this game. I'm not bagging on it like that. Does it make sense? My Dice Star review went out today. I gave it a 7. It's good. But
7? How dare you? That game, this game is much better than 7.
bite me. All right. So
Oh my god, we've gotten that late. That wasn't very witty. Oh my god! Oh wow!
so
It's all good. It's all good. It's all love. It's all love.
Yes, I would not say this is something I was not very fond of. So, okay, so historiographically, there's a couple things going on with Pandemic Fall Rome that are interesting. One is that, okay, so in the notes, it explicitly says, we're not out to recreate history. It's just putting a fun Roman theme on this game. But I actually think that that's not a good excuse, and that if you're going to make a historical game, you got to do it or not in a lot of ways. That is my personal opinion on historical games. I think that the narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves and about the ancient world do have an impact. If Pandemic Fall of Rome is the only game you ever played about Rome, you're going to get kind of a sense of the period that isn't really right. And most people do have that sense of that period. And, is the world going to end because of it? No. But it makes me a little crazy.
Well, I think I think it's a little bit stronger than that, because I doubt we're going to get into a situation where Pandemic the Fall of Rome is the only thing that people are going to learn about Rome. I think the bigger issue is that it reinforces a worldview that centers Rome, and that so you get this like story of civilization, right? That the great story of civilization, like it started in Egypt, but then it kind of migrated to Greece, and then it migrated to Rome, and then a bunch of stuff happens in the middle, then it migrates to the European, and then eventually Britain, and then it migrates to America. So it's almost like like civilization is like this white ball of energy that migrates from place to place to place.
Right, white indeed. So when people talk about Western Civ, this is the narrative that we're talking about. And all of this actually does center, right, on the term barbarian. We're actually appropriating the Romans' own language to talk about how they understood civilizations other than their own. And so we're not very conscious of that, right? It's very easy to just be like, oh yeah, barbarian, ha ha ha. And like we have our own images, even in fantasy games, right, of what a barbarian is.
Well, it's disease. Like they're carriers of disease. Right?
Or they're just like big berserker dudes with an axe running around wearing furs.
I guess this is a pandemic game, right? So like in a pandemic game, you're fighting diseases. So like in Pandemic Fall of Rome, you can really kind of say you're fighting a quote unquote diseased people.
Yes, or people who are the equivalent of a disease, as if barbarian cultures are a cancer in the Roman Empire spreading. And that's really unfair. I'm actually not really comfortable with so just because it's called pandemic, you could be like, oh, it's the pandemic system. It's not the same. But no, you basically equated entire groups of people to diseases.
Right.
And like, you kind of can't undo that.
Right. I mean, well, think of it this way. I was thinking about, because you had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of thinking through what I wanted to kind of say about that. So like, okay, so imagine so no one really today really cares about the Franks. right? They don't have like allegiance to like you don't have people walking around saying, "Well, I'm of Ostrogoth descent." Maybe bear people are, and they're pretty proud of that stuff, but like they don't trace their current identity and lineage to that point, right? It's not a core identity for them. But imagine the same game. Imagine the same game, and you're playing like you're on the Gold Coast in Africa, and then you have like the different tribes, like the Mali tribe and the Dahomey tribe and the Oyo tribe, and they're the ones that are like quote unquote barbarians, like assaulting a coast. Like, how would that game be received? That would not go well. Like, and all we've done is change the locations. Like, the game works exactly the same, but we've changed Rome to somewhere that was valuable to a European colonist, and we've changed these tribes that we don't have any historical cultural attachment to, and now we're going to put that in Africa, or like even worse, like we're going to put that in Mississippi, and these are slave revolts or something like that. Like you don't have to change the game, but what you've done is you've created this. You're stepping into this really really kind of problematic scenario. And like I said, it's not, they didn't do it. They could have, but just the actual construction of just like picking one area that you're going to defend. And this is where civilization and goodness and all this other stuff is. And then everything else is descending upon you, and it's like the equivalent of exactly what Liz was saying. This game is a pandemic game, so it's a diseased people or whatever, like people that represent that kind of threat to that you are like white shining pillar of light in the middle of the board. That can cause a real problem. Yeah.
I think it's worse in this case because it's so unconscious, because it's so hard to put yourself in a position to question it. I think that it makes a really good case study because if you'll just swallow that and not think too much about it, what else won't you think too much about?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the slippery slope type.
Yeah. And the other thing that's always interesting, right, is that, not only do we accept what the Romans say about themselves as gospel, so to speak, but, we forget that, all of these other groups of people, the Vandals, the Huns, they're building their own empires. They feel that they're the center of civilization and that what they're building is really important and that they have a chance to win and, be the ones who have the most land and power in the area. And I think that also because we see Rome as like the default winner until it tragically falls, we don't really appreciate how the peoples who interacted with Rome would have understood themselves and their role in the situation.
Right. So I mean, it definitely sounds like we think this game was a bad idea. And and so we like Liz and I think we're both on the same page. Was like we really wanted to kind of like say it straight, right? I mean, we're pulling no punches. We feel like the way that the historiography of the game plays out is there's this very subtle, not very good context here. However, I'm still glad this game was made. This is not cancel culture. We're not saying get it off the shelves.
No, I literally gave it a Dice
Right.
Tower seal of approval today.
Right. Yeah. So it's on my shelf. It'll be on my shelf forever. I've got to play it. Like when Liz said, let's talk about it. I'm like, I brought it back to the table. Very happy to play. But so I don't want to get into that cancel culture. Okay, I have a big problem trap. What I do want to say is just okay. Let's publish this game. Let's publish a lot of games. I'd love to publish as much historical games. Liz covers a ton of historical games on her channel with her, in this podcast. Like, and it's great that that these games are getting played out. But I think like if you're going to do that, if you're going to like kind of market and like they could have just called this game Fall of Rome, but they put the pandemic name on there to sell more copies. And that, what does that do? It kind of changes things if you really think about it. Which I think Liz and I may be the only two people who think about this stuff. Hopefully, there's more.
But now everyone's listening, so they think about it too.
There you go. That we're raising consciousness. We are very glad this game was made because it gave us an opportunity to think through. So maybe the next game that comes along, the next designer who's listening to this going, they want to make a game about Rome, or like I remember a couple years ago there was that failed GMT game, Scramble for Africa, which it was rightly kind of like shot down because that was like beyond the pale. That one almost resembled what I described, where it's like the different tribes are just like I don't even think they had tribes in that game. They just kind of erased it from existence, which is terrible. That's a step too far. But like I think when people do make historical games, and I want them to make more, I really do. It's worth thinking about. It's worth considering like, kind of decentering your perspective, like understand your perspective, understand what the presuppositions are, and try to get at how other actors in the historical drama would have seen things.
Oh yeah, and one thing that I actually like about the study of history in general is that, part of the issue with it, right, is that it desensitizes us to the situations of people that we no longer have an emotional attachment to, people we don't care about anymore. But at the same time, it gives you a really good playing field for thinking about yourself through the lens of looking at other people and their situation. And
Right.
that detachment is also an opportunity for a little bit of reflection. And so, even though I don't necessarily think that Pandemic Fall of Rome was the best idea in terms of some of the ideas that it does present, even if it's, quote, just a game, it presents those ideas and you play them out when you play the game. I don't think you can avoid that. I'm glad that I had the experience of playing it. I still enjoy it because of the thought patterns it allowed me to have afterwards.
I think that is a definite presupposition of this channel. It's a presupposition of anything that I'm going to create, which will be coming soon. Don't you guys worry. That games are not just games. Like, games are cultural products. If we say that a game gives us joy, if we say that a game, I hear a lot of times, I play games to help with my depression, help with my anxiety, help with bonding our family, like all these great things that games do. We want to say that the games do the great things. We also have to kind of grapple with the ways in which games, especially historical games, they don't do so well. And we want to do it in a collaborative way. We want to do it in a an open to discussion type way. We don't want to kind of lob grenades or anything like that. This podcast to me is meant to start a conversation, not to end one, if that makes sense.
Yes, although let's be real, my opinion is the opinion of
And if you don't like it, bite me.
so I think, so this is a perfect place to
Yes,
stop this
I
conversation.
think so. I think so.
So, Jason, where can we find you on the internet right now?
You can actually, man, you put me. You're really trying to get me to say the name of the channel.
It's the journalist in me.
I know, right? I am user Pope Sixes on BGG. I've gotten a lot of great geek mails, and I actually like getting personal geek mails because it's not just like someone who takes 2 seconds to like something. Like, they took their time, they took their effort to reach out, say what my podcast meant to them. Because I try to. It wasn't just games. Like, it was human interest. I'm a mental health therapist. I'm an interested person in history and culture, and I tried to bring that to. I'm trying to bring it to any content I create. And I think I got a lot of people geek mailing me directly at user Pope Six this, and the Pope Six this. There you go. I'm interested in Rome stuff too. And they emailed me and they said what my show meant to them, and it really, like, that. Some of those mails kind of inspired me to kind of pursue the next thing. And like, I had other places. I'm pretty public on Facebook. I have the Every Night is Game Night group, which that the Every Night is Game Night podcast will definitely morph and change. So I'm definitely hesitant to say what's going on right now. But if you wanted to reach out to me, user Pope Six this, or Liz will put this on like YouTube and stuff, and I'll comment and all that kind of stuff. For now.
Absolutely. And as usual, I can be found everywhere as Beyond Solitaire. Reach out anytime. Jason, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It's about time I had you on, and it was
This was a blast. This was a total blast.
every bit as enjoyable as I expected.
All good.
Listeners, I hope y'all had fun too. Thank you so much for hanging out, and happy gaming.
Later, everybody.